Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Maybe I Can podcast. I'm your host, Debbie Weiss, and I'm here with my guest today, Amber Romaniak. And she is an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert with 10 years' experience helping high achieving women create a level of body confidence, intuition, and optimal health through powerful mindset healing, self care, and overcoming self sabotage with food. She does this through addressing the key negative thoughts, patterns, and limiting beliefs that keep women stuck in the same behaviors for years and decades that they haven't been able to break. Her podcast, the No Sugarcoating podcast, has over 1 million downloads, over 400 episodes, and is listened to in over 88 countries. Amber overcame her own emotional eating after gaining and losing more than 1,000 pounds and spending over $50,000 on binge foods and spending 5 years balancing her hormones and digestion. She also dismantled her deep limiting beliefs and behaviors, keeping her stuck in the same looping patterns. Now she helps others achieve the biggest healing miracles, body freedom and business freedom, so they have the confidence and health to create amazing lives and businesses. So Amber, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you, Debbie.
I'm so happy to have you. And we were saying before I came on, let me just say that Amber had me as a guest on her incredible podcast, the No Sugarcoating podcast. And shout out to you, 1 million downloads, 400 episodes. That is incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a labor of love. And we're at 450 now, so I'm going to have to update my bio.
You are.
But yeah, it's my favorite thing. I love podcasting, don't you? It's just such a great way to connect and share positive messages and stories.
It is. It is. I do. I love everything about it. I have to tell you, I fought it for the longest time. And my coach kept telling me, you're going to be so happy. You're going to be so happy.
Yeah.
And it was just something about it that I think was intimidating and a little overwhelming. But then once you realize this is who I am, I sometimes say things that maybe don't make the most sense. And kind of, isn't that what I want to hear? I don't want to hear some perfectly polished actress on the other end of the microphone. I want to hear a regular person like you and I.
Exactly, because people are craving intimacy and connection and vulnerability and humanness. And I think it's one of the best ways that people can get a taste and experience of who we are and our essence and our personality. It's a great place to be authentic, right?
It is. It is. I have to say, when I first started listening to podcasts, because I think I was late to the party, and I said to my friend, I had one friend who was an avid podcast listener, and I said, I don't understand. Who are these people that you're listening to? Are they famous people? Are they who are they? And she said, I don't know. They're just people that I find that I wind up liking and finding interesting. And I thought to myself, well, that's odd. And now I get it.
Yeah, right. It is. It's such an incredible community.
Yeah, it is. So happy to be a part of it. And thank you for having me. And thank you so much for being a guest on my show as well.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me.
Okay. So let me start off with my first question that I ask all my guests. Tell us about a time where you went from a disempowered, I can't attitude to a more empowered, maybe I can attitude.
Yeah, this is a great question. So I went through a very deep struggle with binging and purging and food addiction in my early 20s. And my low point moment when I went deep into the I can't was after I'd finished a binge, and I would eat until I was so full I was sick, right? So it wasn't just eating a few pieces of chocolate and a handful of chips. It was full blown eating a full table of food. And so that particular night, I was laying on the couch in pain after a binge, just thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing? I don't know why this is happening. I don't know how to change it. I don't want to hurt my body, right? You're just in this deep shame and embarrassment and almost shock because you don't even know what you're doing and why. And so I'd always throw the food in the garbage can after a binge because it would then completely turn me off of obviously going and eating out of my garbage can. But this particular night, I kind of got into this mentality, well, I'll try again tomorrow to see if I can do better. And if this is the last time I'm going to do this, I might as well eat the rest of the cookies. And so I went into my kitchen, pulled out my blue garbage can, pulled the cookies out, ate them, and then just sat on the floor in this absolute shock that I literally just ate out of my garbage can. But what in that moment shifted me from an I can't to an I can was the fact that I had been sitting in a denial that what I was doing wasn't a big deal, or that it was too scary to try and deal with it or change it or get on the journey. And so I was tolerating suffering and a lot of it. And that was fueling the I can't. But what that moment did was the suffering became so big and immense that it crushed all the fear of the unknown, the fear of who would I be if I shifted this, if food wasn't my crutch, if I tried to heal. And then it's like, I can and I have to. Like, I am not willing to have this be what kills me in a few years because I'm being so destructive to my body. And from there, that really catapulted me into my personal healing journey of healing food addiction, binge eating, binging and purging, emotional eating, all of the above, physically, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually over the next few years.
Do you think was it the fact that you actually ate the food from the garbage can? That was just the low point.
Yeah, because it was like, how mortifying and embarrassing. Like, I would never want anyone to know this dirty secret of mine. Like, people are gonna think I'm just like a piece of crap if they find out I just ate out of my garbage. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm crazy. It's all this negative self-talk and all this judgment, and it's so heavy and dense. But at the same time, we get so stuck in our heads. I call it the ego, the negative voice that's just like, you'll never change. It's not a big deal. Food's your friend. It's a crutch. Like, it'll be so hard to navigate life if you don't have this crutch and all this stuff. But in that moment, eating out of the garbage just like shut my ego up. And I was just like, it's like I found this will, bravery, and courage inside of me that was just like, we're catapulting you onto this path. You have no idea how you're going to deal with any of it, but you're just going to get on it and you're going to take it one step at a time. And that's literally what happened.
I have to tell you that I've been in other groups discussing weight loss, and people have said that they've done the same exact thing as far as eating out of the garbage can.
Yeah.
And one woman said she would not only put the food in the garbage, but then she would take dish soap and pour that over the food.
Yeah.
So we are all in good company for those who have ever done something like that. So no shame, no judgment for sure. Tell me, did it start? You said you were in your 20s, that it started in your 20s. Is that when you started to have this type of relationship with food, or is it something that you experienced early on as a young girl?
I think it really started as a young girl, like unconsciously, but I obviously at the time couldn't pinpoint I was emotionally eating. So when I was 5, my first day on the school bus, I get on the bus, the older boys start yelling at me, calling me fat and ugly, and then the whole bus just started making fun of me. So that triggered me to become very insecure in my body and created a lot of body image issues, and I was very shy from then on for about 20 years. And then the second thing that I think really created this emotional relationship with food was my mom, bless her heart. She was so sweet and she was doing the best she could being a mother, right? I was the only child. And she got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis before I was born. And I think that whole thing just like really shattered her internally and was obviously very emotionally overwhelming for her to deal with. And so I think one of the ways she would compensate to numb and cope with her own diagnosis was with food. And then she was using it to compensate in our relationship because she felt guilty if there are certain things we couldn't do because her symptoms would flare up. And obviously I was never upset with her, but I just can't imagine the grief and the emotion she was feeling around that. And so a lot of our relationship was revolved around food. So I think it's not her fault, but I inherited a lot of like the food addiction and the cravings, and I could eat whatever junk I wanted whenever I wanted. And so I was eating copious amounts and just thought it was normal. And then I think into my early teens, I find all the diets and the fad diets. My first diet was the gazpacho diet, which gazpacho is like tomato, onion, and
Yeah.
horrible. I freaking hated onion and tomato. I'm like, what am I even doing? That lasted for like 2 bites.
Yes.
But then Hollywood, right? And all the photoshopping and editing, and you watch movies and the girl gets broken up with and she's eating a box of chocolates. Like, it's really actually heavily planted into our subconscious minds to normalize using food as a coping mechanism, but to then be so critical of ourselves because we don't look perfect. And then what's the solution? Diets and weight loss plans that don't actually work, right? So this all fueled me into 2021. And then I had my first serious breakup. I was so hurt. I couldn't eat, lost weight really fast, couldn't maintain it. And then it's just like this switch flipped at 21 and the full blown binges just started where it was a full loss of control. And then that created the all or nothing mentality where it was either like panicking because I just binged again, I gained another 10 pounds. Oh my gosh, I better like work out for 2 hours a day. Now I need to skip breakfast and lunch and only have salads for dinner to compensate. And of course, that all in diet restriction would just throw me way off the edge back into the binges. And it just fueled that for a few years. And then I gained 60 pounds in 4 months and was the heaviest I'd ever been. And really was fighting in that cycle for about 2 or 3 years deeply before I had that garbage can moment and was like, I've got to figure this out.
So from that moment, where do you even start?
Yeah. So people always ask, did you get help? And I said, no, not really. I went and saw one therapist, and I'm not poo-pooing therapists. This was just a poor experience that I had, but I went and poured my heart out for the first time. And she just looked at me and said, just don't go to the store and buy the food and love yourself. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go
Yeah.
binge now because that was really crappy to just not feel any kind of empathy. So I was like, I think I have to figure this out on my own. I don't know why, but I'm just feeling this gut feeling. That was my intuition. I just didn't know it was at the time, saying like, you're going to figure it out. So I started actually researching about sugar first because sugar was my biggest nemesis. I could not eat a mindful amount. I would start and I could not stop. And my cravings were like 120 out of 10. Like I was thinking about it all the time, obsessing about it, and terrified of it at the same time because of just how easy it was for me to lose control. And so when I started to learn that refined sugar is 10 times more addictive than cocaine, and that it was exciting the same part of my brain and giving me a dopamine high, and dopamine's your mood boosting neurotransmitter that when you do drugs, hard drugs, it gives you the same kind of dopamine high. It blew my mind, but I'm like, wow, I'm not crazy. There's addictive qualities to certain foods that I'm losing control with. And this is part of it. And so it's like each chunk I learned, I felt a little less crazy and a little less hard on myself because I'm like, okay, this makes sense. This is why I feel like this when I eat this. This is why my cravings are so strong. And then learning about MSG and how it increases our appetite levels. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, no wonder when I go to certain restaurants, I just want to eat the world. Like, oh my goodness, this is really impacting my gut. No wonder I'm so bloated and I have all this unhealthy gut candida from antibiotics and eating all the sugar. No wonder I crave sugar because that makes you crave sugar. And then I started to clean up the way I was eating. I was trying to eat less refined sugar, more natural sugars. I don't want to restrict. So it was a matter of anything more refined. I wanted to find a better swap that was more whole foods based. And everyone takes a different approach. But for me, because my food addiction was so severe with sugar, I felt more comfortable trying to get it out of the house and out of my body to gain traction. For like 50% of my clients, they don't have to do that. But if it's intense, sometimes we have those decisions to make. So it was when I started to really like make healthier swaps and I still wanted to binge all 10 bananas in a jar of peanut butter, that I'm like,
Mm.
this isn't just about the food. There is a deeper level of this. And so that's really when phase 2 of the healing started. And that was really around just being lovingly honest with myself, going, I don't love myself. I hate my body. I don't feel good enough. I have this void, this lack of self-love, right? Because I'm tying my worth up with the way I look and the number on the scale instead of knowing I'm good enough. I suck at coping with stress. I have no healthy coping mechanisms. I'm afraid to feel, and I don't know what's triggering me to binge. So then I took it upon myself that I'm like, I've got to figure this part out. So when I would binge or emotionally eat afterward, I'd try my best to get over the guilt and shame as fast as I could. And then I'd start writing about, well, what happened? What triggered me to binge? Because if we want to start to overcome it, we have to start understanding what created the urge in the first place. And so I made a big list of triggers and put it in every room in my apartment. And so that way, when my triggers started to creep up before I went to the store to get my food, I was like, no, like look at your list first, see what's going on, try to catch it. So that was helpful and starting to understand, wow, there's a lot of triggers, and it's not just boredom and sadness and being upset with the number on the scale. It's fatigue, it's people pleasing and getting rejected. It's not sleeping well. It's hormone imbalances and gut issues. There's so many things fueling this. And then I had to muster up the courage to start feeling my feelings because I was terrified to feel. I thought half the world would fall off if I sat and felt. And so the first time I sat and felt fear, I was so nervous, but I did it for 30 seconds and it was like, wow, I did it and nothing bad happened. Okay. Like I'm going to just baby step into it's safe to feel. right? And then I started integrating self-care practices and trying different kinds of journaling and meditation and baths with essential oils and yoga and more time in nature and making my favorite cup of tea and meditation and EFT tapping and all of these tools that I just self-taught that really started to help to ground me. And the more grounded I felt, the less urge I had to binge. So all of this started to really significantly reduce how often I was binging from almost every night to once every few weeks to minor overeating over here and there to nothing. And then the last piece on the mindset, weight, body image piece was really having to let go of like needing to be a certain number on the scale and have the perfect flat stomach and the perfect body and really catch the negative self-talk, shift it to positive embodied gratitude, which took time and consistent effort. But that really helped with the self-love piece. Disassociating your worth with the number on the scale when you've associated them together for years does take time to change. And I just say that because if you're listening and you're like, oh, I feel like I've been fighting with my body for years and I try to do affirmations for a week and it doesn't feel like it changes, it's going to take longer than a week, but you'll get there. And so as I was healing all of this, my friends and family members were going, Amber, you're different. You're calmer. You're glowing. You're eating different. What's your recipes? What are you doing? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm working on my digestion and I had a food addiction that I didn't want to tell anyone about. And everyone's like, oh yeah, we totally emotionally eat too and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, if I struggled with this and like every single woman I'm talking to is or has, how many women need help with this that like aren't getting the help they need to fully heal it? And that's then really what inspired me to start the business 10.5 years ago. And the last piece that I'll share about the healing is when I really started to overcome the self-sabotage, my intuition really came online. And that was scary. I'm like, I can see things that are going to happen. I can feel people's energy and emotion. Like, and I shut it down for a little while because it was really intimidating and I didn't know how to manage it. But then I slowly started to learn how to set healthy boundaries and manage my energy. And it was safe to have access to this gift of an intuition. And so it was like the physical, emotional, energetic, and spiritual healing. And obviously, still to this day, I work on my mindset and the spiritual healing, not with food, that's all fine, but it's other things come up.
Of course. Of course. I'm amazed at your story that you did this all by yourself. I've got to think it took a lot of just the fact that you even thought to say, okay, let me journal and figure out what my triggers are and let me post them everywhere. And what, how did you combat, like even sometimes, even when because I've been there a million times, I'm eating, it's because I'm stressed. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what really started to help me catch that I don't care mentality, because that was totally one of mine too. I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to go waste money I don't have and end up with a horrible stomach ache and be brain fogged and in so much pain tomorrow. And so I think there's a few things that I had to really like understand to catch that strong pull in the moment. Because once you get into that I don't care mentality, it can feel really hard to stop. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that I was like driven to make the list of triggers and put it in every room of my house, because when you're in the midst of being triggered to want to emotionally eat or binge, the last thing you're thinking about is what's triggering you. You want your quick fix. You want your dopamine high. You want to numb out and check out. And so putting that in every room of my apartment helped me to start to make it top of mind, to not just go to food and go, no, let me look what's going on first. Because if I want to heal and I don't want to be broke and have like no money in my bank account and no good relationships and be alone and in a crappy retail job for the rest of my life and be sick, like I've got to start taking ownership and responsibility and really looking at this. And so that's where the list and like the drive to start putting in the work was so important. And then the other thing I started to learn and research about, because I'm like, okay, the evening is when I feel most vulnerable to do this. Why? I don't even want to binge right now, but all of a sudden this urge is coming out of nowhere. So what happens is every time we repeat a pattern, and I was binging at night watching TV, that we make a neural pathway or a habit in the brain. And so the longer you've been doing it, the stronger it is. And so when I go to sit down and turn the TV on, this pathway in my brain's ending up going, it's time to binge, it's time to binge. And I'm like, I don't want to. But I had to understand this. There's this brain chemistry element. There's this dopamine pleasure response that's lighting up, telling me to do this thing. And so the more I dove into understanding the depth of what binge eating and emotional eating and food addiction are on a brain chemistry level, an emotional, physical, and energetic level, the more I was able to understand why the pull was so strong and that the I don't care mentality was not something I was willing to tolerate anymore because it was costing me too much financially, emotionally, relationship wise, physically, on all levels to keep tolerating the behavior. So some days I was good at catching it and shifting it, and other days I failed miserably, but the momentum started to build. And then what starts to happen, and this happens to every single woman I've ever worked with, is you get to this point where you're looking at the food or you're in your car in the parking lot getting ready to go in and buy it. And you're just like, this doesn't even feel good or right anymore. It just doesn't do the same thing that it used to. I'm so turned off by it. I don't have the same desire. And when we start to get to that place, it builds us so much confidence and hope and light within us that we can shift it. And then it really starts to diminish. But that I don't care mentality is so strong in the beginning because we don't know all of our triggers. We're so deeply desiring that pleasure, quick high. And we have this pathway lighting up going, do this, do this, do this. There's no pathway that lights up and goes, don't do it.
You so was your oh gosh, I can't think of the word, but so did you when you realized it was a trigger and you didn't want to eat, was did you have something else that you would substitute? Like every time I feel like eating, I'm going to journal or meditate or something else, another bag of tricks or tools that you used?
Yes, 100%. So I think that was one of the things that I had to start shifting was having things. Some say it's a bit of a distraction, some say it's a pattern interrupt. And I think we need a bit of both to help unwire that old pathway and build a more mindful one. And so this is where I would pull out my box of tools. Do I want to journal about my triggers? Maybe I need to go lock myself in the bathroom and take a nice bath with my favorite essential oils and then go right to my bedroom and meditate and go right to bed. Maybe I'm going to eat dinner and actually just get out of because the living room, as soon as I'd go in the living room in the evening and turn the TV on, it would light up. So I'm like, I'm going to just eat dinner, go into my room, close the door, put on relaxing music, read a book, or just do something that's just going to help me until this urge starts to calm down more. So yeah, everyone has a different kind of toolkit of different things that they can use depending on the trigger. Now, if the trigger was connected to someone else, then I was like, okay, I've got to start having difficult conversations. Even though I'm a people pleaser and it's scary, I need to start learning how to set healthy boundaries and saying no or asking for help or whatever's bothering me. And so there's this whole other aspect of healing people pleasing and healing the perfection, I don't care mentalities. And so I would use my journaling to help me build awareness around why I was a people pleaser or why I had a perfectionist mindset. And then I would take those actions with those specific people and have those conversations, even though it was nerve wracking and I was terrified of being abandoned. But that's all the stories that the mind makes up. So yeah, 100%. There was all kinds of different things that I did just depending on the trigger and how I was feeling.
Did you have that difficulty with then how did you approach regular eating? I mean, regular meals and all of that. Was it I understand what you're saying. For you, you wanted to basically eliminate sugar. But what about other things? Was there something else? Did you feel guilty if you ate a piece of pizza or whatever that was? Or did you think of good food, bad food in a good girl, bad girl kind of way?
100%. So for a while, as I was healing my binge eating, I definitely would be very critical and judgmental and feel guilt if I did eat any kind of like fast food or pizza or go to a restaurant and indulge in anything or have dessert because I still had this fear of losing control and I had this fear of losing control with my weight as well or eating something and getting horribly bloated because my digestion was such a mess. I was also heavily addicted to casein, which is the protein found in dairy, and gluten, which is the protein found in wheat. Here in North America, the gluten content is 300% what it's supposed to be. So it does excite the same part of the brain as heroin, and casein can excite the opioid-like receptors in the brain. So I'd eat a piece of cheese and then want to eat the whole block. So I was finding dairy-free and gluten-free swaps, but I'd still feel guilt if I overdid it a bit or, these muffins, like they're going to make me gain weight. So that took a while to shift that. But what really helped me get to this very empowered place with food, number one was a mindful eating practice. So shutting off technology, no more TV eating. I'm like, if you want to eat, you're going to have to sit at the kitchen table with no distractions And it really was like, okay, I don't even want this anymore, right? If it wasn't physical hunger. But I started to make my mindful eating practice enjoyable. I had certain candles and used certain like plates and bowls and had flowers and made it a beautiful, enjoyable experience so that I could reassociate food with a positive experience. And I'd sit and eat mindfully. My digestion improved because I was chewing thoroughly. I was taking my time and I was feeling more physically and emotionally satiated because I was aware of what I was eating and how much. And I was able to stop when I was full. I think a big reason why people will binge or overeat, mindlessly eat, sitting watching TV or whatever they're doing is because we're not present. And when we're not present, we're likely to eat up to 40% more. And then that can easily turn into binge or emotional eating. So really setting that healthy boundary with eating mindfully at the table helped me feel satiated. And that also prevented the binge eating. And then what really helped me to get to this place where I had no more food fear around losing control with sugar or any food at all. Part of it was time. I needed time to heal, to fill that void, to build confidence with myself and with food. And then the more I understood how food impacted the body, right, and why I was behaving the way that I did, and I forgave that, it's like I could have these foods again, but honestly, they taste so sweeter. I could taste the processed ingredients that I don't care to eat them often because I make better with what I have or find local makers, and I just find it's way better. And plus, from an energetic standpoint, a lot of processed food is very low frequency. And when I eat it, I feel my intuition dim. I kind of feel like my frequency drop. I don't feel as connected to source. And I don't like that feeling. So I'm like, I have enough alternatives for the most part, unless it's like Christmas or we go on a trip. Of course, I'm going to indulge. No fear, no worry. But I just feel optimal with the way that I care with my body and the way that I eat. And we're not deprived. Like we made nachos last week and I make the best pizza with goat cheddar and pesto and oh my gosh, and like gluten-free gnocchi with chicken pesto and like everything. My loaves are amazing. People are like, you should sell these. I'm like, I would probably resent it if I tried. You know what I mean? But it's
Yes.
just, you get in the kitchen and you fall in love with food all over again because you don't loathe it anymore. And I think that's the most amazing thing. If I want to indulge, I can. If I don't, but there's no guilt or anything afterward. And to me, that's the ultimate. You fuel your body for health and vitality, and you also enjoy mindful indulgence. That's the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what do you think it is for so many of us women who struggle that make weight loss so difficult? Do you think it seems like, look, when I was growing up and my memory of my first diet, oh, it had to be before I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
I started, my mother used to joke, "Oh, you were born at 11:40, right in time for lunch." And the fat shaming started literally as I was an infant.
Mm.
But back then it was tuna fish, which I don't eat tuna fish, and lettuce. And pretty much that's it.
Yeah.
So back then, and for me, that was in the 70s. So back then, it was extremely restrictive. We've seen it come a long way since then. So it's no longer as restrictive, depending upon what plan or whatever you're going to follow. And in the old days, I felt that it was too restrictive. Nobody could sustain that.
No.
What do you think it is nowadays that stop most of us from being able to lose weight and maintain the weight loss?
Yeah. So there's layers here. Number one, diets don't work. We've been marketed such a falsehood, and the diet industry is a multi-trillion-dollar a year industry for a reason. They don't want you to lose weight and keep it off. They want you as a lifetime customer. Same with Weight Watchers and all these other plans. The other problem with, oh, I've gained weight, now I need to diet, restrict, and exercise to lose it is that we get conditioned into this mentality that all these little gadgets and measuring tapes and calorie counters are going to tell us what we need to do to fix it, when that's not going to actually fix it and help us understand, well, what's going on inside of me that is contributing to my body hanging on to this weight, because weight is a protective mechanism and we hang on to weight when we don't feel safe. So if we start to shift our perception and get curious and go, okay, if weight is a protective mechanism and I'm hanging on it, feels hard to lose, or I keep gaining it back, let me get curious as to what may be going on physically, emotionally, and energetically inside. I think the last piece as to like what blocks us is we have been so heavily marketed to via TV, print, magazine, commercial, social media, celebrity endorsements, Oprah endorsing Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers or whatever it is. And yet she's gaining and losing the same 50 pounds over and over again. Like it's not even working for her. So it's like we have been so conditioned and programmed in the mind that once you lose weight, you'll finally be happy. And so we have attached happiness to weight loss and that I can't be happy unless I lose weight. And then we don't treat our bodies with as much love and respect if we are in a phase where we're putting on protection instead of letting it go. So the most common weight loss blocks that I see that most women are not aware of or not necessarily knowing how to address are, number one, instead of healing their relationship with food, the binge eating, the emotional eating, the food addiction, the binging and purging, they're going and buying a diet and getting more conditioned and confused with how to eat. More food fears are being inherited because if you do keto or low carb, you're now going to be afraid of carbs. I'm afraid of a carrot. I'm afraid of an apple. These are nourishing foods and we need carbs. So healing your relationship with food is actually the first step if you are struggling with any kind of emotional stuff with food, because you're putting so much stress on your body emotionally and physically. So that's the first important step. Otherwise, you're going to keep gaining and losing. The second thing is being willing to let go of the diets and the diet mentalities and the restriction. Because if we're not eating enough, we're not going to lose weight and keep it off. We need to eat enough to release weight and have the body feel safe. The next thing is hormone imbalances. So I learned this because after I stopped binge eating, and this was like 23, 24, I got my hormones thoroughly tested and then started to dive down that rabbit hole. But then I gained 60 or 70 pounds really fast again, even though I wasn't binge eating. And I'm like, what the heck? Why? I'm not binging
Yeah.
anymore. But it was all this destruction from binging, restriction, exercising 6 days a week, not eating enough, eating too much. It stressed my body to the nines.
Mm.
And so I was flagging postmenopausal with barely any progesterone. My estrogen was through the roof. I had severe adrenal fatigue. To just give example, it's supposed to be about 350. Mine was 2000. And cortisol is your stress hormone. That's like, I'm surprised that I survived through that. My thyroid was off and underactive. So I had all of these issues, right? So many women have hormone imbalances that go undiagnosed or go even investigated. And if that stuff is going on, it's going to be really easy to gain weight and feel really difficult to lose. Underactive hypothyroid makes it really hard to feel like you can lose weight. High cortisol, low cortisol, high estrogen. The body just wants to hang on because she doesn't feel safe. If we have high inflammation, which feels like retention, puffiness, swelling, heat, pain, it's harder to lose weight. If we have poor gut health, same thing, because it's feeling inflammation and gut issues. So even as you hear me, weight loss actually has many layers, and it's not as simple as just eat less and exercise more. The weight loss blocks or the emotional eating triggers are teachers, and your body is trying to show you where things are out of alignment in the mind, the body, the spirit, because she wants to help you heal and bring you into alignment. She's not out to get you. And then the last thing that people usually don't look at is the emotional piece. So my poor wounded inner child that was 5 that got called ugly and fat on the bus, she was wounded inside of me for 20 years before I connected with her again. That was making me hang on to protection because I'm like, well, I'll get less attention if I just have this, and then people hopefully won't make fun of me, right? So I had to heal some stuff with my inner child. There was a lot of shame and guilt around finance and money that I had to work on letting go of. All that negative self-talk and rejecting my body. So forgiving ourselves and healing that and really learning how to love ourselves as I was doing all of this. And then I quit the gym because that was just overwhelming my body. And as I did this, it melted off. And I was like, I'm sleeping, eating good, and meditating. And it's this easy. Like it blew my mind that it got to be that easy, that I didn't have to go kill myself in the gym doing exercise I hated. I didn't have to diet. And so that's how I help my clients. There's no insane diets or restriction, mindful movement that you want to do, but it's investigating the hormones, the gut health, inflammation, relationship with food, mindset, inner child. And these are the key things that as you heal and you calm your nervous system, of course your body's going to let go. Why would she hang on?
Wow. I want to know. I'm really in awe that you were able on your own to discover and challenge and figure out how to heal your inner child, how to come up with your tool belt on your own. To me, that seems like you were extremely powered and dedicated and on a mission, which is incredible. And of course, that's why having you as a coach now is so valuable because just speaking on my own behalf, I've worked on a lot of things over the past several years. And I find it helpful to have someone who is there saying, try this, try this, try this. So when you said you had to deal with healing that inner child, and I just did an exercise the other day in a training that I'm doing.
Mm.
And it was, I can't remember how the beginning of it started. And it was, but I know it was tuning into a feeling that you were feeling. And then the visualization said, go back to the earliest time that you can think of that you felt that feeling. And the instructor said, most people are going to go back somewhere to the ages of 3 and 8. And I was astonished that I went right back there to 3 years old. And, I could picture myself being there. It was like I started crying, thinking of the emotion and the whole thing. And I still, like, I just did this about 5 days ago, and I'm thinking, wow, even if I understand that's where it came from, is that enough to heal those feelings? I mean, how did you work through this all on your own? Or did you at any point have any other coaches, therapists, mentors, guides?
Yeah. Yeah. So I read a few books like Louise L. Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. That book was really helpful with understanding like self forgiveness and self love, and how if we hang on and hold resentment and guilt and things like that, that it can create imbalance in the body. So that's a great read. I think the other thing, I didn't really have any consistent help. I went for the odd intuitive healing session, and what really would come up was like the self loathing, and it's about learning self love. And with the inner child stuff, I kind of was sitting one day and I'm like, I still feel upset about what happened when I was 5. And then I'm like, maybe I have to go talk to my 5-year-old self. And so I closed my eyes and I went in and back to, like you said, back like when you were 3, I went back to when I was 5. And I actually walked through the whole experience with her. And I was like, I'm here. Don't worry. I'm going to make sure that you're safe and everything's okay. And so I started to just kind of, I think there's many ways you can connect with your inner child. There's no one size fits all, but I started to go back into that experience until it felt neutral, like I felt no more emotional charge to it. And I really had to like hug myself and like envision hugging my inner child and letting her cry in my arms and reassuring her and telling her, I'm so sorry you went through that. Like, we didn't know what to do, and they didn't mean it. And you're amazing. And it was a lot of that like reassurance and love and building yourself up, nurturing yourself like a baby. And I think that's what a lot of us really need, because we haven't been nurturing ourselves since we were a child and our parents nurtured us, or maybe you never got nurtured, so you don't even know what it feels like. So it's kind of like I would read a bit of a book, or once every year and a half, I'd maybe find someone and I was going more for energy stuff, like energy healing. I just found that more helpful. And so they'd either suggest a book or a video to watch, or I would go to the bookstore and find something else in the self-help section. And that kind of really is what accumulated. And then I had found one woman who was a body talk practitioner. And I was telling her about doing the inner child work. And she's like, did you know that all your insecurities that you have now are from your wounded inner child? And they've created this negative voice in the mind called the ego that tells you you're not good enough, wants you to be in fear, wants you to limit yourself, wants you to be critical and hang on to the past. And I was like, the ego of like, I've never heard of that before. And so then I like delved deep into like, I need to master my ego, because that thing has run me my whole life and it is not nice. And so it's been like the last 12 years of really working on that, because we all have this negative limiting voice and we're human. Sometimes we get triggered and it takes over. But for some people, it's calling the shots 24/7. For some of us, we can catch it in a week and take our power back. But the ultimate mastery is when something triggers you, something upsets you, you get hard on yourself, you have a breakdown, that you can actually get into a mastery state where you can catch it and shift it and process and let go of the negative emotions and be back in your power in 10 minutes. And so I feel such a drive to heal, because the more I learn and heal, the more value I can provide to my clients, the more they're like, oh my gosh, that I don't care mentality. I can so relate to that. I know what I need to do. I'm just not doing it mentality. I have that. And it's just helps you have your own inner peace. And I think I'd rather have inner peace and calm than a loud voice yelling at me all the time than like, I don't know, like a really expensive purse, because it gives me quality of life to know how to manage my mind. So it's like these little experiences I had with different people. And I'm like, I want to really get this and heal this.
Absolutely. I agree with you. You talk about energy healing. For someone who doesn't have any idea what that means, can you give us a brief overview?
Yeah. So here's the thing that we're not really told. We are energy. You rub your head against the couch and like the hair, right? Like goes static. Like we are full of energy. Emotion is energy in motion. When you're angry and you like just want to beat your pillow up, this is energy in motion. And so you can go onto Google and you can search energy frequency chart because this will just give you a good visual. But if you think about it, when you're really happy and enjoy and having a fun time, you feel light, you feel energized, right? You're like, oh, this is great. And then when you're angry and you're sad and you're comparing and you're jealous and you're lack fear, it's heavy, it's dense, it drains your energy, right? And then when you're down in that mode, you're like, ooh, maybe I should go and eat that chocolate, or maybe I should overwork because I need to distract myself or go numb out with technology. So when we're in a positive emotional state, we're emitting more positive energy or a more positive frequency. That's why when someone gives you a hug or when you're not feeling good and someone takes care of you, you feel better faster because they're emitting this love energy and you're taking it on. So when you look at this chart on Google, you're going to see that love, joy, gratitude, happiness vibrate at a very high level. And so when we're in those states, we're energetically feeling a very positive energetic charge. And that's part of what helps us to heal the body. And then when we're in a negative state, we're feeling a very negative, dense charge. And that's why it's so draining. So with energy healing, what's so powerful is we can use different self-care tools to help us let go of negative emotions and help us raise up into that more positive, energetic state. We can also have energy healing support us to find different like negative emotions that are stuck in the body and different tools we can use to release it. You can get Reiki and people that can really bring in a lot of healing energy and help clear things that you may have inherited through your ancestry, or cutting cords to people that are feeding off your negative energy. There's so many things, but I think the best place to start is to understand that we emit energy, we are energy, and that depending on how you're feeling is really going to dictate, if you feel more energized and happy and light or kind of negative and low. And that will really dictate the way you behave, what kind of hobbies and habits you have, if they're more positive or not. And that when we're around positive people, we feel better. When we're around negative people who are complaining and enabling negative behavior or judging or criticizing you, we feel more dense and negative and we want to get out of there as soon as possible. So we start to tune into the energy of a room, of others, right? And your intuition is part of this too, right? That gut feeling. So it's deep. It's so
Yeah,
fun though.
it is so fun. And I'll never forget once I started becoming more in tune, and I did really start to notice those around me that I never really paid attention before, how they made me feel or how much they complained and everything
Yeah.
was always lousy and a problem. How are you? Terrible. This happened. This happened. And you're thinking, really? And
Mhm.
so much so that after I would hang up the phone or see them, I'd almost like want to take a shower to wash away all of that negativity that I felt like they spewed all
Yep.
over me. And for the longest time, I wasn't even really aware of
Mhm.
that feeling. But once you do become aware, I guess it's like everything else, right? When you have this new awareness, this new understanding, the whole world looks new
Yes.
and different.
It's true. And then you start to realize, wow, I don't just have to tolerate that. Wow, I can sage or take an Epsom salt bath or do some energy stuff to clear that energy dump that just got dumped on me, which is empowering, right?
Oh, extremely empowering. You mentioned tapping, and I want you to, if you don't mind, just let people know because you can't see, but I just recently
Oh Yeah,
but
totally.
a tapping book. I've done it before. It When first introduced to it, it feels a little strange, or at least I felt a little
Mhm.
bit strange. However, just like a lot of these things where I, for the longest time, said, I can't meditate, I can't journal. Well, when I changed my mindset to maybe I can, and even if I approached meditation one way and it wasn't something I enjoyed, that didn't mean that the whole meditation umbrella was something that I
Mhm.
couldn't enjoy. I just had to find what worked for me. And I think for myself, when I've opened my mind to these things, and instead of having that negative attitude of this is ridiculous, this will never
Mhm.
work, or those kinds of things where you're setting yourself up for failure, you know, and going back to the tapping, it is amazing that if you do take a look at where you are prior to the tapping and where you are afterwards, there's no denying if you're keeping an open mind.
100%. It's an incredible tool. I agree. And at first it is a bit weird, but it's like you get over that because what's better is that it gives you results and it gives you relief. And to me, you get used to the rest. But it is a really powerful tool. And the tapping solution, the founders there, Jessica, I can't remember his name. Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a brain fart, but he's on the book there that you have.
Yeah, Nick Ortner.
Yeah, the Ortners. So that's how I learned to tap. And I started just like going around and doing, and then I started creating tapping scripts. And why tapping is so powerful is because you are actually, first off, when you tap on the karate chop point on the side of the hand, you're literally sending a signal to your amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's like stress, fight, or flight, flooding cortisol and adrenaline through your body that you're safe. You can start to calm down. You can start to go back into rest and digest mode. And then it's also great because it regulates the nervous system. It boosts the immune system. And you're tapping on these different acupressure points that help realign the body. And the other reason I love tapping is because you're tapping out negative thoughts and limiting beliefs and energy from the body that's stuck. And then there's this void in the subconscious mind and the body, and you get to tap in. It's like planting seeds in your garden and watering them with positive affirmations and empowerment. And as you finish your round of tapping, you're like, I feel unstoppable, right? It's so
Yes.
powerful. And you can use it for physical symptoms, emotional stuff, like anything. It's very powerful.
Yeah. Completely. For me, as a beginner, the scripts are the part that is a little bit challenging. If to have them personalized, for
Right.
you to personalize them, especially just speaking for myself, I feel like, oh gosh, what if I did this wrong? What if that's not how I'm supposed to use the script?
Uh,
I get stuck in that kind of thing. Oh,
Fair
maybe
enough.
this is wrong. Maybe I'm doing something that's going to make it worse than better. But that's a limiting belief I need to
Yeah,
tap out of me, right?
totally.
So as we wrap up, why don't you let our audience know? I mean, I know there are so many different ways to work with you. Why don't you tell everyone one where to find you and some of the things that you can do to help?
Yeah, for sure. So the website is amberapproved.ca. There you're going to be able to learn more about body freedom. You're also going to be able to take the free emotional eating quiz if you're wondering if you're struggling, and that will also send you some great podcast resources. You can also listen to the No Sugarcoating podcast on the website or any podcast app, and you will find all kinds of golden nuggets. And then if you're wanting to connect and talk a little bit more about you and what's going on and explore a journey and what path is best for you, the best way is to book a 30-minute body freedom consultation. You'll fill out an intake form, it's $50 USD. We connect for 30 minutes on Zoom, and then we can make sure we cater specifically to you and your needs and get you exactly what you need.
Mm, wonderful. Amber, thank you so, so much. You are really a light and an inspiration because I love how self-taught you are, how self-aware you were, especially at such a young age. I mean, your 20s. My goodness, my kids are in my 20s. They barely know their last names. I'm very, very, very impressed with that and all that you have to offer all of us. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone else, I will see you next time on the Maybe I Can podcast.